The first bullet from Emmaline Kane's gun went wide, striking the canyon wall as her hands trembled with rage. The second found its mark, knocking the weathered hat clean off the head of the man who'd called her nothing but a weak little lady not 5 minutes earlier. "Next one goes between your eyes, Mr. Pritchard," she called out, the Nevada sun beating down on her auburn hair. "Unless you'd like to reconsider your position on my father's land." It was 1885, and at 22, Emmaline had heard enough men tell her what she couldn't do. Since her father's passing 3 months ago, every vulture in Silver Creek County had come circling, each convinced they could intimidate the poor defenseless daughter out of her rightful inheritance. Jebediah Pritchard backed away slowly, hands raised. "Now, Miss Kane, let's not be hasty." "I merely thought you thought wrong," Emmaline cut him off, keeping her revolver steady. "My father's ranch isn't for sale, not to you, not to anyone. You have until sundown to clear your men off my property." Pritchard's face darkened. "You'll regret this. A woman can't run Pine Valley alone." "Watch me," Emmaline replied, jaw set in determination. As Pritchard mounted his horse and rode away with his 2 companions, Emmaline allowed her shoulders to slump slightly. The truth was, she had no idea how she would manage the 20,000 acres her father had spent his life building. The cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, and rumors of rustlers had been spreading through the territory. She holstered her revolver and turned toward the modest ranch house that had been her home for as long as she could remember. The white paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the windmill creaked in protest against the afternoon breeze. Her father's dog, an aging border collie named Scout, came trotting up to her side. "It's just you and me now, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. That evening, as Emmaline sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and crimson, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her hand instinctively moved to her sidearm as she stood, scanning the horizon. A lone rider appeared, silhouetted against the fading light. He moved unhurriedly, his horse picking a careful path down the winding trail toward the ranch house. As he drew closer, Emmaline could make out a tall figure with broad shoulders. His clothes were trail-worn, and a week's worth of stubble covered his jaw. "That's far enough," she called out when he was within earshot. "State your business." The stranger reined his horse to a stop and raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Name's Wade Xavier, madam. I heard you might be looking for hands. Who told you that?" Emmaline asked suspiciously. "Bartender in town. Said John Kane's daughter inherited the place but might need help running it." His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that suggested he'd come from somewhere east of the Mississippi. "The bartender talks too much," Emmaline replied. "And I'm managing just fine." Wade Xavier dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. In the fading light, she could see his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work and open spaces. "No disrespect intended, Miss Kane, but I counted at least 3 broken fence sections on my ride in. Your cattle are scattered halfway to the foothills, and unless I miss my guess, those tracks I saw about a mile back belong to rustlers who have been helping themselves to your stock." Emmaline bristled. "And I suppose you're just the man to fix all that. I've been working cattle since I was 12. Spent 5 years with the Bar S outfit up in Montana, 2 with the Flying W in Colorado. I can ride, rope, and shoot, and I don't mind taking orders from anyone who knows what they're doing, man or woman." "I can't afford to pay much," Emmaline said, her practical side warring with her pride. "Room, board, and fair wages is all I ask. Plus, I'd rather work for someone with spine than someone with deep pockets." Despite herself, Emmaline felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. You can sleep in the bunkhouse. There's food in the kitchen. We start at dawn." "Yes, madam," Wade replied, tipping his hat. "And Xavier, I do know what I'm doing. My father made sure of that." "Never doubted it for a minute, Miss Kane." The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Emmaline was already in the barn when Wade arrived, saddling her chestnut mare. She wore split riding skirts, practical boots, and her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. "Morning," Wade said, reaching for a saddle. "What's the plan?" "First, we round up the scattered cattle. Then we check the north pasture. That's where those rustlers have been hitting us." Wade nodded, working efficiently to prepare his horse. "You ride as well as you shoot." Emmaline gave him a sharp look. "You heard about that, did you? Whole town's talking about how John Kane's daughter put a bullet through Jeb Pritchard's hat. Can't say I'm sorry to hear it. Man's been trying to gobble up every small spread in the county." They rode out as the sun crested the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Emmaline led the way, her posture straight, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Wade followed slightly behind, taking note of the land, the rolling grass that would fatten cattle nicely, the clear streams that cut through the property, the natural boundaries formed by ridges and rock formations. "Your father chose well," he commented, as they paused to water their horses. "This is good land." "The best," Emmaline agreed, a hint of pride in her voice. "He came out here with nothing but a wagon and a dream in '59, built everything from scratch, and taught his daughter the business," Wade observed. "He had no sons," Emmaline said simply. "And he wasn't about to let his legacy die with him." By midday, they had rounded up nearly 30 head of cattle that had wandered far from the main herd. As they drove the animals toward the home pasture, Wade noticed Emmaline constantly scanning the horizon, her hand never far from her weapon. "You expecting trouble?" he asked. "Always," she replied. "Since word got out about Pa dying, it's like every opportunist in 3 territories has decided a woman alone is easy pickings." "Not so easy from what I hear," Wade said with a slight smile. They worked steadily through the afternoon, checking fences and water sources. Wade was impressed by Emmaline's knowledge and stamina. She rode as well as any man he'd worked with and knew every inch of the sprawling property. As the sun began to set, they headed back toward the ranch house. The golden light caught in Emmaline's hair, turning it to fire. Wade found himself watching her more than was strictly professional. "You planning to stay in these parts long?" Emmaline asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "No real plans," Wade admitted. "Been drifting since the war." "You fought Union cavalry, joined up in '63 when I was 18. Emmaline studied him with new interest. "You've seen a lot of country then." "Too much, sometimes. Never found a place that felt worth staying." That night, after a simple supper, Emmaline sat at her father's desk, poring over account books by lamplight. The ranch was in worse financial shape than she'd admitted to anyone. Between the cattle they'd lost to rustlers and the loan her father had taken out last spring after the drought, the margins were razor thin. A knock at the door startled her. Wade stood there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, Miss Kane. Just wanted to let you know I patched that hole in the barn roof and fixed the loose board on the corral gate." "Thank you," she said, surprised. "You didn't have to do that tonight." "Couldn't sleep," he said with a shrug. "Figured I might as well make myself useful." His eyes fell on the open ledger. Though he said nothing, Emmaline sensed he understood more than she would have liked. "We'll be all right," she said, more to herself than to him. "It's just a rough patch." "Your father built something special here," Wade said quietly. "Takes grit to carve a life out of this country." "Yes," Emmaline agreed, looking up at him. "It does." Over the next 2 weeks they fell into a rhythm. Dawn to dusk, they worked side by side, repairing what needed fixing, tending to the cattle, and keeping watch for rustlers. Wade proved to be everything he'd claimed and more, skilled with horses, tireless in his work, and respectful of Emmeline's authority. For her part, Emmaline found herself relaxing slightly in his presence. There was something steadying about Wade Xavier, something solid and dependable that made her feel less alone in her struggle to keep her father's dream alive. But trouble was brewing. Jebediah Pritchard hadn't taken kindly to being publicly humiliated by a woman half his age. In town, rumors circulated that he was gathering men, planning something that would force Emmaline to sell. The warning came from Hattie Miller, who owned the general store. When Emmaline rode in for supplies, the older woman pulled her aside. "Pritchard's been in here buying ammunition and hiring guns," Hattie whispered. "3 rough-looking men rode out with him yesterday. Be careful, girl." Emmaline thanked her for the warning and headed back to the ranch, her mind racing. She found Wade mending a saddle in the barn. "We may have trouble coming," she said without preamble, relaying what Hattie had told her. Wade's expression darkened. "Pritchard's the type who doesn't take no for an answer." "Well, he's going to have to learn," Emmaline said firmly. "This land is all I have left of my father. I won't give it up without a fight." "You won't be fighting alone," Wade said, his blue eyes meeting hers. Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Emmaline insisted on taking the first shift, positioned on the porch with her rifle across her lap. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the ranch yard. Around midnight, Wade came to relieve her. He settled into the chair beside her, his rifle resting against the porch railing. "Nothing?" he asked quietly. "Nothing yet," she replied. "But they'll come." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the corral, the chirp of crickets wrapping around them. "Why this place?" Wade asked suddenly. "You're educated, capable. You could sell, move to a town, have an easier life." Emmaline considered the question, her eyes on the distant mountain silvered by moonlight. "When I was 12, there was a terrible blizzard. 3 days of howling wind and snow so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. We lost some cattle, but less than most because Pa had prepared so well." She paused, remembering. "On the 4th day, when the storm finally broke, Pa took me up to the ridge. The whole valley was covered in snow, pristine and beautiful. And he said to me, 'Emmy, this land will break your heart and mend it 100 times over. It will demand everything you have and then ask for more. But if you listen to it, if you respect it, it will never lie to you.'" She turned to look at Wade, her face soft in the moonlight. "This land is in my blood. I can't imagine being anywhere else." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Some places get under your skin that way." "What about you?" Emmaline asked. "Why keep drifting? What are you looking for?" Wade was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "After the war, home didn't feel like home anymore. Too many ghosts, too many memories. So I started riding, thinking maybe I'd find somewhere that felt right." "And have you?" she asked softly. His eyes met hers. "I'm beginning to think I might have." The attack came before dawn. Emmaline was jolted awake by the sound of gunfire and the acrid smell of smoke. She grabbed her rifle and ran to the window in time to see flames licking at the corner of the barn. Wade burst through her door, fully dressed. "They've set fire to the barn. At least 4 men." Emmaline was already pulling on her boots. "The horses, I'll get them. You cover me from the house." Before she could protest, he was gone, sprinting across the yard toward the burning structure. Emmaline positioned herself at the window, scanning for targets. A flash of movement caught her eye and she fired, rewarded by a yelp of pain. Outside, Wade had reached the barn and was throwing open the doors, slapping the panicked horses on their rumps to drive them out to safety. As the last animal bolted free, a shot rang out and Wade dropped to one knee. Emmaline's heart lurched. Without thinking, she raced out the back door and around the side of the house, using the shadows for cover. She could see Wade now, pinned down behind the water trough as bullets kicked up dust around him. Taking careful aim, she fired twice in rapid succession. A man cried out and fell from his position behind the woodpile. The distraction was enough for Wade to make a dash toward the house, though Emmaline could see he was favoring his left leg. "In here," she called softly, holding the door open. Wade stumbled inside and Emmaline quickly barred the door behind him. In the dim light, she could see blood soaking through his pant leg. "You're hit," she said, helping him to a chair. "Just grazed," he grunted. "How many did you count?" "4, like you said. I think I got one." Wade nodded grimly. "Recognized Pritchard's foreman. This isn't just rustling, they mean to burn you out." Outside, the barn was fully engulfed in flames, casting an eerie orange glow through the windows. The sound of men's voices carried on the night air. "Come out, Miss Kane," called a voice she recognized as Pritchard's. "No need for anyone else to get hurt. Just sign over the deed and we'll be on our way." Emmaline moved to the window, staying carefully to the side. "And if I refuse?" "Then I reckon that fancy house of yours will burn just as nice as the barn," Pritchard called back. "Your choice." Wade had torn a strip from his shirt and was binding his wound. "We need to split them up," he said in a low voice. "If they surround the house, we're finished." Emmaline nodded, thinking quickly. "The root cellar, it has an outside entrance behind the woodshed. If I keep their attention here, you could circle around behind them." "I'm not leaving you alone," Wade protested. "You're not," Emmaline said firmly. "You're evening the odds." After a moment of hesitation, Wade nodded. "Give me 5 minutes, then make some noise to keep them focused on the front of the house." "Be careful," Emmaline whispered, surprising herself by squeezing his hand. Wade's fingers tightened around hers. "Always am." 5 minutes later, Emmaline fired 2 shots through the front window, shattering the pre-dawn silence. "That's my answer, Pritchard," she shouted. "Come and take it if you think you can." A volley of gunfire answered her, bullets splintering the wooden walls of the house. Emmaline ducked down, waiting for the barrage to end before changing position and firing again. Outside, she heard a shout of surprise, followed by the unmistakable sound of a fist connecting with flesh. A gun went off, and then another. A man screamed in pain. Cautiously, Emmaline peered out the window. In the light of the burning barn, she could see Wade engaged in a desperate struggle with one of Pritchard's men. Another lay motionless on the ground nearby. Pritchard himself was taking aim at Wade from behind the well. Without hesitation, Emmaline raised her rifle and fired. The bullet struck Pritchard's shoulder, spinning him around. His gun discharged harmlessly into the air as he fell. The last man, seeing his employer down and his companions either unconscious or surrendering, dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "Don't shoot," he called out. "I'm done." Emmaline kept her rifle trained on him as she moved carefully to the door. Wade had Pritchard's foreman on the ground, the man's arms twisted behind his back. "Are you all right?" she called to Wade. "Better than them," he replied, a grim satisfaction in his voice. By the time the sheriff arrived, summoned by the sound of gunfire reported by a neighboring rancher, the barn was a smoldering ruin, but the rest of the ranch had been saved. Pritchard and his men were taken into custody. The businessman's blustering about his legitimate business interests falling on deaf ears when the sheriff discovered wanted posters matching 2 of his hired guns. As dawn broke fully over the valley, Emmaline stood looking at the charred remains of the barn. Wade limped to her side, his wounded leg properly bandaged now. "We can rebuild it," he said quietly. Emmaline turned to look at him, struck by his use of we rather than you. "It won't be easy," she said. "Between the rustlers and now this." "Nothing worth having ever is," Wade replied. He hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said earlier. I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Something in his voice made Emmaline look up sharply. The expression in his blue eyes stole her breath. "Why?" she asked simply. Wade's weathered hand reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "Because in all my wandering, I've never met anyone like you, Emmaline Kane. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel the need to keep moving." Emmaline's heart hammered in her chest. "I thought you were just passing through." "So did I," he admitted. "But some things change a man's mind." "What things?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A woman with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. A woman who fights for what's hers with everything she has. A woman who makes me think that maybe there's something worth staying for after all." Emmaline swallowed hard. In the few weeks since Wade had ridden onto her land, he had become essential in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not just for his skill with horses or his strong back, but for the quiet strength he offered, the unwavering support that asked nothing in return. "I can't offer much," she said honestly. "This ranch takes everything I have. It may never be profitable or easy." "I'm not asking for easy," Wade said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm asking for a chance to build something here with you." The rising sun caught in his blue eyes, turning them to flame. Emmaline felt something inside her shift and settle, like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. "Yes," she said simply. His smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of worry and weariness. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Wade leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Emmaline responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "They called you weak," he murmured. "But from the moment I saw you, I knew they were wrong. You're the strongest person I've ever known." Emmaline smiled up at him, her heart full. "Strong enough to rebuild a barn," Wade laughed, the sound warming her from the inside out. "Strong enough for anything, I reckon." In the days that followed, word spread through the county of how Emmaline Kane and her foreman had fought off Pritchard and his men. The story grew with each telling, until Emmaline was said to have single-handedly defeated a dozen armed outlaws. The truth was both simpler and more profound. With Wade by her side, Emmaline set about rebuilding not just the barn but the entire ranch. Neighbors who had been wary of the woman trying to run a cattle operation alone now came to offer help, impressed by her courage and determination. By summer's end, the new barn stood tall and strong. The cattle herd was recovering, the ranch house had a fresh coat of paint, and Pritchard was facing charges that would keep him occupied for years to come. On a warm September evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in breathtaking hues of pink and gold, Wade took Emmaline's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, but her eyes were soft as they met his. "I've been saving my wages," he continued. "And I thought maybe, if you were agreeable, we might make this arrangement more permanent." Emmaline's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of arrangement did you have in mind, Mr. Xavier?" Wade smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "The kind where I promise to stand by your side for the rest of my days. The kind where we build this ranch together, as partners in every sense." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "I'm not a man of many possessions or fancy words, Emmaline. but everything I am is yours, if you'll have me." Tears welled in Emmeline's eyes as she looked at the man before her, the man who had ridden into her life when she needed him most, who had fought beside her, who had seen her strength when others saw only weakness. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll have you, Wade Xavier." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Wade's blue eyes shone with a happiness Emmaline had never seen there before. "They called you weak," he said softly, "but I knew better from the start. You, Emmaline Kane, hold my whole heart in those capable hands of yours." They were married on the first day of October, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the mountains and the ranch looking its finest. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by the handful of loyal neighbors who had stood by Emmaline through the difficult times. That night, as stars appeared one by one in the velvet sky above Pine Valley Ranch, Emmaline and Wade stood on the porch of the house that was now truly theirs together. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Emmaline leaned back against his solid strength, her hands covering his where they rested on her waist. "I'm thinking about my father," she admitted. "About how much he loved this land, how he fought for it, how he taught me to do the same." "He'd be proud of you," Wade said softly. "Proud of what you've accomplished." "What we've accomplished," Emmaline corrected him, turning in his arms to face him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Wade." He shook his head, his expression serious. "You would have found a way. That's who you are, Emmaline. You don't give up." "Neither do you," she pointed out. "You could have kept drifting, looking for something easier than a struggling ranch and a stubborn woman." Wade smiled, touching his forehead to hers. "There's nothing easier about what I feel for you, Mrs. Xavier. But there's nothing in this world I'd trade it for." As winter settled over Pine Valley, bringing with it snow that blanketed the land in pristine white, the ranch house glowed with warmth and life. Wade and Emmaline worked side by side through the short days, tending to the animals, repairing equipment, planning for the spring calving season. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, sometimes talking for hours about their hopes for the ranch, sometimes sitting in companionable silence, content in each other's presence. Word spread throughout the county of the ranch's revival. The spring cattle drive was the most successful in years, with Wade's connections bringing new buyers to the table. Emmaline's careful management of their resources saw the last of her father's debt paid off by midsummer. And when autumn came again, bringing with it the rich golden hues of the changing season, Emmaline had news of her own to share. "A baby," Wade whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach, his blue eyes wide with wonder. "Our baby." "Our legacy," Emmaline corrected him, her heart full to bursting. "Another generation to love this land as we do." As the years passed, Pine Valley Ranch flourished. A daughter arrived first, Sarah, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. 2 years later came a son, John, named for the grandfather who had built the ranch from nothing. The children grew strong and capable, learning the ways of the land just as Emmaline had. And on warm summer evenings, when the work was done and the family gathered on the porch to watch the sun set behind the mountains, Wade would often pull his wife close and whisper in her ear, "They called you weak, but I always knew. You hold my whole heart, Emmaline Xavier. You always will." And Emmaline, looking out over the land that had tested her, broken her, and ultimately made her stronger than she ever thought possible, would smile and lean into her husband's embrace, knowing that together they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. Not just a ranch, but a legacy of love and determination that neither drought nor fire nor the cruelty of men could ever destroy.